Hi and welcome to JC Talks. I'm your host, Justin Caffrey. These are honest and authentic conversations about how I recovered from trauma, the tools that I implement to sustain my mental and physical health. And I share the ideas and infrastructure that I use with my own clients on a one-to-one basis. These conversations are conducted in a live audience, and if you would like to participate, please drop me an email. Now, let's move on, and I hope you enjoy today's talk. Discipline, which is a horrible subject, right? Nobody ever really wants to go near this in the context of how we need to take care of ourselves. It would be much nicer to think that I can just be healthy if I just, hope for the best, and in the end, everything will work out. The one thing I've learned most in my life is that the more loose ends that I leave hanging around, the more opportunities there are for those loose ends to trip me up. And the discipline and structure that I put into my life is to make sure that I avoid leaving too many loose ends out there, leaving too many opportunities for life to trip me up, because it will trip us up. It is absolutely going to do that if we allow it to. Painful, but it's reality. And it's no different to this whole idea that, everybody wants to have a great body, but nobody really wants to do the work. We'd all love to look a lot different to everybody else, but nobody really puts in that extra work. And if you actually see somebody who is physically in good shape, it's not a coincidence that they've achieved that. They've put in an awful lot of work in order to get to that point. So the idea for discipline for me was one that I drifted from many years ago. I was incredibly disciplined in my 20s and even into my early 30s. I was very driven, very determined. I was incredibly methodical in the way that I wanted to do things. And it was also kind of easy because, I was a workaholic. So a lot of the discipline and structures that I'd needed back then would just come into play because I would be relentless in the way that I would want to do things. But as I started to deal with my own challenges around stress and anxiety, I also started to realize that much of the problems that I create in my life are actually designed by myself. I leave things out there and I don't deal with them. And the more I don't deal with them, the worse the problem will eventually become. And then it blows up in my face. And I think, why me? Why is this happening to me? I don't deserve this. But actually, if I take a step back and look at the things that I've left out there, the places where I've lacked discipline to tidy up those loose ends, I suddenly find a trail of crumbs that has been left by me. And when it came down to my own decisions around my mental health and then thinking about how do I get myself healthy in the context of my mind and my body, I needed to have a really good hard look at my life. And that was, 6 years ago. I had a poor diet. I had no downtime. I wasn't sleeping enough. That was pretty disastrous. I was flying 150 times a year. I wasn't spending enough time with my family. I wasn't devoting enough time to friends. Just, the simple things in life. I was smoking. It's really hard even to say this now. My son heard the other day that I smoked, and he was like blown away that he couldn't even believe that was ever in my life. I had asthma. I was overweight. I had a leaky gut, which is like really gross thing that I had to see a specialist for, and they were medicating me on. I was drinking way too much. I mean, I was probably drinking every day, I suppose. Not to the point where I think I was an alcoholic, but I didn't really have a good relationship with alcohol. And if you think about all of these things, in the context of all those, I haven't actually said I had poor mental health. But I had lots of threads in my life that were all over the place. And the consequences of all those things is inevitably going to be that you're not in the best shape mentally. And certainly you struggle to be able to believe that you can conquer and change very much because you feel like crap. You're overweight, you're tired, when you're stressed, you smoke. When you're stressed, you drink. When you're stressed, you don't sleep enough. Don't spend enough time with friends. Don't spend enough time with family. And then I eat, you know, and eating becomes a mechanism to self-soothe. And food is often the forgotten drug in the context of our mental health. And the discipline around food is really, really hard, which I'll touch on as we move forward. But it really came back to the same thing, you know. It came back to, what are my actions in respect to my health? And what state of mind do I have in the context of how I'm trying to be, or who I'm trying to be, or what I'm trying to be, or where am I trying to go? There was no vision, there was no structure. I was just fumbling one day through to the next. And going back to the same thing of not paying attention to the things in my life. And I can remember having a car stolen about 6 years ago, and feeling really aggrieved that the car was stolen, and that, you know, why is this happening to me? But then that was kind of a really good moment and a good event for me to start realizing, you know, this isn't something that I control, the car being stolen, but actually a lot of the other events in my life that were going on were within my control. And the stress that I felt about the car being stolen, which, to be frank, I mean, it was just money, right? Okay, we don't lose money, but it wasn't the end of the world, was more to do with the fact that I was asthmatic, I was overweight, I was smoking, I was drinking, I was taking medication for digestive issues. My diet was absolutely crap. And these are all guaranteed blockers that are going to prohibit your growth. Like, without question. There's no point even trying. If you go, well, you know, most of these are all right, I'm sure I'm going to make it through. It doesn't work. If you want to make real change in your life, you have to kind of sit down and treat your body as a business. You have to sit down and have a conversation with yourself and say, the changes that I want to make are significant. They will be incremental. So I'm not saying for 1 second that you go and make these changes overnight, but you must then put a plan together. And the thing that I've learned most in my life, in my business life, my personal life, on developing in my own mental health and wellness, is you got to write stuff down. You know, if you want to just flute around and hope that things are going to change, they don't. You know, and we're all fully aware of that, and so am I. And even now, even to this day, I still have times where I drift. You know, I've been drifting over the last few days about something that I need to get done. And I realized I haven't written it down and actually put together what I'm doing. I'm just allowing it to drift. So, you know, as much as I'm talking to you about the disciplines that I use, I'm certainly not saying that I'm without flaws, but I know where the flaws are, and then I know how I need to deal with them. And then I know it's that horrible word, it's discipline, it's rigor, it's structure. So I had to go on a path, and it started with stop smoking. I kind of looked at everything that was going on in my life, and I thought, where is the worst thing that I'm doing right now? And I went, yeah, that's pretty bad. That's right up there. I know unquestionably the damage that I'm doing. But it was also the most difficult thing to give up, because probably the thing I was most addicted to. So I thought, if I tackle something really big, then as I move down through my list, it'll be a little bit easier. So I needed to tackle stop smoking. And the biggest problem with the whole idea of the smoking side was that it inhibited my ability to exercise. I was never going to make it down through my list if I wasn't exercising properly. So smoking was number one, strike it off. Then it was straight into exercise more. No excuses, you don't smoke anymore. Okay, exercise more. Then it was, I got to change my diet because, the saying, your abs are made in the kitchen, right? You cannot possibly hope to lose weight just through exercise. You also have to start rethinking your relationship with food, because unfortunately it is less calories in and more calories burnt means you lose weight. There's a million diets that will give you all kinds of ideas about how best to do this, but it is just a simple equation. So I thought, okay, change my diet. And that's when I decided to go vegan. And one of the biggest driving factors in the context of going vegan was that I was going to cut out dairy and eggs. When you take cheese, eggs, and then animal product out of your diet, you basically kill junk food almost overnight. And the problem that I had with junk food was I was traveling an awful lot at this stage. I was still flying a lot. I was running my business in a couple of different countries. So I needed to really be disciplined around food. And I thought, okay, I'll go vegan. That way then I'm cutting out dairy. So that's chocolate, sweets, gone. I'm cutting out animal product. So that's nearly all of the kind of fattening things that you find in processed food. And I'm cutting out cheese, which again is kind of like pizza, and everything is gone out the window. And even to the point that when you go vegan, you can't eat jellies, right? You can't even eat those kind of sweets because there's gelatin, right? It's pig that is used in these kind of sweets. So that was a massive change, I can tell you, when that happened. But again, it meant, okay, now I've just kind of created a funnel and now I'm narrower on my choices. The next big one was, okay, I've got to stop drinking. And it was 4 years ago when I decided, okay, alcohol has got to stop. I've tried the, drink less, and every year I'd stop drinking for a month and the whole lot. But I thought, I really want to make radical changes in the context of my mind and body. My head was I'd say 4 years ago, I was in pretty good shape. I had a good meditation practice in order. I was practicing mindfulness. I was exploring Buddhism at this stage. I was studying psychology. There was lots of good things going on, and I was also writing papers on neuroscience. But I knew I couldn't really get up earlier on the days when I was drinking. I knew that it definitely inhibited my capacity from a performance perspective in my mind and body for a few days. So I thought, all right, I got to do it. I got to stop drinking. Now, my original teacher, who is an Indian psychiatrist, told me 2 years prior to that, you'll stop drinking soon. And I laughed at him and I said, listen, forget about it. You're Indian living in Ireland. You have no idea. This is like part of our lifeblood. If I don't drink alcohol in Ireland, I might as well just leave now. There's no point in me staying. So quitting alcohol was a big move, and socially it was a big move. We lost a lot of friendships. Dinner party invites stopped. All that kind of stuff disappeared. But actually, I learned a great lesson, and that is the people who are truly your good friends are still around. And those who value you because of alcohol, well, they weren't really that important in the first place, as it turned out. So, again, it helps you to deal with some of those loose threads in your life. And then I needed to start developing some mindful habits. So I wanted to, of course, I was sustaining my meditation practice, but I then also started to get involved in cold water because I wanted to get more disciplined in the approach to how I was dealing with my day-to-day life. So I started swimming in cold water. And if I didn't swim in cold water, I'd make myself take a cold shower, which was horrible. And I still don't like cold showers, but it's still to this day, if I don't go and swim in cold water, I will make myself be in a cold shower. And if I swim in cold water, I can have a warm shower. So I've created a reward, a carrot and stick mechanism within the whole idea of cold water, and that works really, really well. And then there's education. I needed to educate myself. So you put all of the stuff together. But if you want to then make and continue to make the changes that you need to educate yourself. So it's time to start reading. It's time to start researching. It's time to start listening to podcasts. It's time to start understanding what is the kind of person that I want to be. So for you guys who may be working on some of your plans about the things that you would like to see or change in your own life, you have to work back to that plan and then vision forward as to the type of person that you want to be. Where are you going to be at the end of this process? You know, is it a 3-year process? It is a 5-year process? What do you look like? How are you going to feel? I think it's key when you think about where you're moving to, that you're able to understand the state of mind where you came from. So as you build a plan, you must still have your reference point to go back and remember, what did it feel like to be unhealthy? What did it feel like to be medicated? What did it feel like to be drinking too much alcohol? What did it feel like to be smoking? What did it feel like to have an anxious mind? So, actually, journaling and keeping record of these points on your journey helps you keep going. And if anybody's ever heard of the hero's journey, which is the key principle that's used in all Hollywood movies, it's key to see the guy or the girl at the start of the movie whose life has fallen apart, they're struggling terribly, and then it works through a clock. It's basically a 12-hour process. So there's a 3 o'clock, a 6 o'clock, a 9 o'clock, and 12 o'clock. And at 3 o'clock, their faces in the dirt, they're struggling, they're having to find the grit and determination to push through. And then at 6 o'clock, they found a teacher, they found a capacity to start changing. And then at 9 o'clock, they're starting to own that. And then at 12 o'clock, life is beautiful, right? So in our own journeys, we must still have the reference point to say, oh, yeah, that's where I was. And really, that's the place that I don't want to go back to. So the same thing happens and applies to the mind as it does to the body in the context of wanting to work out. You know, everybody wants a happy and calm mind, but nobody's willing to do the work. I'm not saying nobody's willing, but a lot of the time it's hard for us to do the work. So I needed to then carve out more rigor. And that's when I built my bedtime routine. Sounds kind of silly, right? But a bedtime routine is critical. Until you start mastering sleep, frankly, everything else is irrelevant. And the more study I put into sleep, the more interesting it became. And the amount of money that professional sports puts into sleep is just extraordinary. Manchester United were one of the first teams to develop the whole idea of sleep psychology, which Ferguson brought in, I think, in the late 90s. But now it's a massive industry. It's $1 billion industry where you have experts on sleep. But really, it's about just creating a routine and structure. And, you know, I posted this on my Instagram stories last week, and a lot of people responded and said, well, you know, okay, but I'm on shift work or I have young kids and it doesn't really work out the same way for me. The structure and routine can move around. What's key is you start to figure out how much sleep you need, which is critical. And then in addition to that, you prepare a routine that starts to teach your mind and your body that you're going to go to sleep. So you're preparing a routine in the context of the lighting in your room. You're making sure that your room is tidy, it's neat, your bed is made, you've got nice structure. So when you arrive into that room, you're calm, you're zen, and you're ready to sleep. And I need to build my morning routine, which we've spoken about on many occasions before. And then you also need to build your capacity to deal with the difficult days when they arrive, because they're still going to come. So the great thing about the discipline that you put into your mind and your body is that you build this awareness, understanding of what makes you tick. And you can also suddenly notice, I feel really crappy right now. My mind is circling in a negative way. I've come to the point where I've lost belief in myself. I'm not good enough. I'm going to get found out. This isn't going to work out. I'm too fat. I'm too slow. I'm too old. I'm too. When you put enough structure and discipline in your day, you're able to actually go, that's interesting. That's happening right now. And I'm not going to stay in that state. And it means then that you're able to go, I'm going to take the necessary to shake this off. So that could be just as simple as going for a walk. Today I was working in my office, which is 10, 15-minute walk from my house. And I realized I'd been there for too long and I was stagnating and I was starting to feel negative. So I knew a good idea was that I would move from my office to my home. So I knew that I would have a 15-minute walk between the office and my home. And in that 15-minute walk, I would be outside, I would be in nature, I would see people, I would distract myself and change my state. So it's that idea that when you are in a negative state, you have two options. One is keep it and it's yours. You have it and you own it, you can wear it and you can let it bring you right down. Or you can have an awareness, look what's here. This is not pleasant, but I have an option. So you also then need to change your state. The power of language is incredible to change the way that we feel about ourselves. Now, it's important that the person who's speaking is not somebody that you don't really like or appreciate. But if you find a couple of things that you think, that's a really interesting speech. There's a great Al Pacino speech from In Any Given Sunday, which for me is my go-to one. Whenever I'm thinking I can't do this, I put on the Al Pacino speech. And I'm like fired up, and I'm ready to take an army over a mountain and conquer a country. But I know that there's sometimes I need to just have that noise come in, because if the voice in your head is the commanding voice, you have to either be able to switch it off, which is really tough. Okay. And, your meditation practice, your mindfulness, and all this kind of stuff will help. But you also have to have that, in case of emergency, break glass. So have a couple of things that really fire you up. And the great thing is, with our phones now, we have this technology with us, so we can save it and we can go boom, and it goes in there. So I know when I've lost belief in myself, when I'm down on myself, I need Al, and he's going to come on and he's going to kick ass. And I'm going to think, yeah, you're right, Al, I have this. I can do it. And it's quite incredible. And it never ceases to amaze me. And I was talking to Brian Penny, who, for those of you who have ever come across Brian, he's an incredible neuroscientist. And myself and Brian spent hours hanging out together talking about neuroscience. It's such a nerdy space that we both love. And the one thing that we talk about more than anything else is the power of the voice that we speak to ourselves. And then what voice can we use to get ourselves out of the quagmire? So having that in your space, having it ready, and then knowing that when it really gets bad, I've got something that's going to bail me out. Because if you don't have it, as I said, it's yours to keep. And then once it's yours to keep, you're then going to get nowhere, and you'll drift, and you'll be on your mobile phone, and you'll be, on social media, and then you watch Netflix, and you probably eat something as well, right? So once that fog kind of comes in, it brings in all of your bad habits. They all just kind of come drifting in. So when you see it coming, you have to be able to change your state. And then the last point I'll just talk on is fasting, and the whole idea of fasting and why do I do it. The principal reason why I fast is because if I don't, I know I'll just eat too much. So I needed to have a good relationship with food. And I work from home, and I've worked from home for years. So I'd have offices outside of my house, but I'd still spend a lot of time at home. And if you're in close proximity to a fridge, you tend to open it. So I needed to put some structure around my relationship with food. So fasting worked really well. But it's also an incredible discipline to help me also focus on good mental health. Because with fasting, you are creating a structure around a behavior, and you are deciding that you're going to put some rules around how you operate. And I think of all the things that I do, whether it's meditating, cold water, my diet, my exercise regime, everything else, fasting is the one that like really kind of focuses me all the time, because I think, okay, I'm not going to eat for 19 hours. And today was an example where I did a Pilates class at 9 o'clock this morning, and I finished that at 10:30. So by the time I finished that, it was nearly 20 hours since I'd had any food. And it just amazes me the human body's capacity to be okay with that and actually to work through it. So it's a reinforcing point of all the other things that I use in the context of my discipline that help me stay focused. Now, I'm not for 1 second saying to everybody who's on here tonight that you should do all the things that I do, because, you know, as my wife would say, Justin, you are very extreme. So I have to accept that the journey that's got me to this point is one around understanding the things that I need to do to sustain my mind and my body and to keep me healthy. And I continue to do them because I still have that note, that journal that references back to how crappy I felt 6 years ago. And I don't want to go back there in any way, shape, or form. So it's the rigor, the structure, the discipline, and it's not easy. But when you put in the work, it's hugely rewarding. So how does that resonate with anybody tonight? Is everybody just going, yeah, whatever, I'm out of here. I'm off to the pub.
Just ask a question, Justin. You've got this very rigorous structure in place, as you say. My routine is completely different. It doesn't allow me to have that kind of structure in place, and I particularly don't want to. I'm quite happy to do the breathing and come on here, do my therapy, do the exercise and things like that as well. But I saw recently where you had two bad days when the black cloud descended again. So despite all the structure that you put in place, you're still getting these black cloud days. Is that true?
Yeah, absolutely. But I would say, so that was 2 weeks ago. I had a Monday, which was a real old issue for me, which is fear of failure reappearing again. But I would say in the last 6 years, I probably couldn't count on two hands the amount of bad days that I've had. 6 years ago, I probably couldn't count on two hands the good days that I would have over the course of 12 months. So it's a no-brainer. You're never going to create this kind of perfection. And of course, you can watch social media and you'll see people saying that they feel great all the time and, do this or do that, and you'll feel great too. But it goes back to what I said, John, about the changing of the state. When I had that bad day, I knew I needed to go deep inside it and figure out what it was. Rather than trying to just ignore it, I wanted to really understand what was driving me and what was making me feel like the way that I did. So I went after it. But it's in contrast to how I felt before. Generally, life is good. It's not, and I think it's an important thing, and especially in terms of Buddhist psychology, and as a practicing Buddhist, we also realize that 80% of life is life, and the extra 20% is happiness. So, we're often missold this idea from a Western standpoint that everybody should be 80% happy and 20%, challenging. Life is tough in its general form, but it can be rewarding if you put the work in. And leaving behind anxiety, stress, and depression is important. But John, you're doing that work in the context of your therapy, and coming on here. And I'd advocate over anything else for you to develop a simple meditation practice. And I think you would find it very advantageous. But it's hard. It takes discipline and sacrifice, and it's not easy.
Yeah, and I read a survey or a study recently where it said that mindfulness sometimes can be detrimental to people's mental health. Now, it's only in a small percentage of people, maybe 1 in 20 who are doing it. I don't know if you saw that. So is there any fear that doing mindfulness may actually cause you harm?
Well, it's a
I know you
somebody.
disagree. Yeah.
No, no, no. I
No?
wouldn't. I wouldn't say I disagree. I mean, I think.
This is the journalist in me asking these questions. So
Oh, that's a good question. I think if you there's a big question in the whole mindfulness world, and I come at mindfulness as a Buddhist as opposed to the kind of Mac mindfulness side of life, where you pick up a book, you try and do a few mindful things, and then you hope that life changes. In in Buddhist psychology, we focus on the movement between life as it is and then life as I want it to be. Life as I want it to be, with all the things that I hope to have and the attachments that I'd like to get, is where we are bringing ourselves into lots of pain. Life as it is just the things that are coming at me, and I deal with them each time that they arrive. When somebody has an experience of mindfulness and there is a negative article about how they felt on the back of learning to meditate, if you've suppressed a lot of anxiety and tension in your life and then you go and meditate, you will start to release it, and you will be faced with some of the deeper, darker sides of your mind and that you may have wanted to suppress and move on. But if you look past that moment and say, well, what happens if you continue to suppress it then and don't go into mindfulness? Do you go through life and then you feel okay in the end because you've suppressed all those feelings? No, because they still come back. So mindfulness, if somebody uses it and they just come close to a past trauma, for me it was dealing with the death of my son. So I can speak very openly about watching Joshua die in front of me in Beatrice's arms. But if I had have stayed the way that I was 6 years ago, I would have suppressed it. And when I first read about mindfulness, I was on an airplane reading a book about mindfulness, and I started to get quite a shock because all of a sudden I was really starting to remember quite viscerally seeing Joshua dying. But it also made me think, hold on a second, this must be in here in a bad way, and this book is bringing it out. Now I have an option. Do I bury it and keep going forward, which probably would have meant, it would have been all right for a few more years, but I probably would have drank more, ate more, and eventually would have probably had a stroke or heart attack? Or do I step into the nature of mindfulness and go and look within myself as to what the issues are and let them come up? So when you see those negative stories, it's because somebody has had to see something that's unpleasant and then they go, God, I feel really bad. But before you get through to the point of feeling good, you will always feel bad. It's the nature of self-improvement.
yeah, it's to do with therapy as well. Therapy brings you through all that process. So yeah, no, I get it. It hasn't affected me in that way. I've actually found it positive. So you're right. I'm still need to get that kind of structure in place, but everything else around it is pretty good at the moment. So I can't really complain.
You're on the path, John. And like the thing as well is that people will often say, oh yeah, no, I don't like therapy. I went to see this therapist. I felt awful after I had a couple of sessions with them. Well, yeah, because it's cathartic. You've got to kind of let that stuff out. These are all the things we don't want to hide. You don't pay your therapist to be your masseuse. And you're going in there to talk about really challenging things. You're not going in there to come out after an hour going, oh, that felt great. I feel fantastic. Now, as time goes on, you feel better, but the early stages of therapy are hard.
If I may, I would I would like to point out that I worked with Justin, and it has always been a pleasure. So let's get that out of the way. And I remember sitting on your sofa telling you how I have clocked 1,265 consecutive days of meditation on Headspace. And the first thing you said to me was, all right, have the last one today, because as of tomorrow, if you want to work with me, you can meditate. So there is a side of Justin which recognizes when meditation isn't beneficial. And you indeed said this thing to me where you said, there is so much stuff happening when you meditate that you haven't dealt with, that you're basically kind of grinding your way through it. So first we'll deal with that in the therapy. And when you're ready, you can go back. It took 2.5 months before you allowed me to go back to that. But I just wanted to give John the other side, that indeed there is there is time and space when maybe there is something better to be done than just to sit with it. And then I also wanted to ask a question, because you said an interesting thing, and this is something I struggle with, is that when you're in a bad state, that you can change it, like you chose to walk, and that's what I see that I have trouble happening, is that I would have a really hard moment, almost like a meltdown, and then I almost get paralyzed, because I'm like, well, on one hand I can go and run, for example, but on the other hand I would be instantly like trying to negotiate with myself, like, am I running away from this? Should I just sit with it? And if you could maybe elaborate a little bit more on how do you decide, like, when is it good to actually do something physically to change that state, and when is it better maybe to be with it, because that's where I don't know.
I think great question, by the way, and yeah, to go back to your point, Jan, and thanks for sharing that. When we work together, um, meditation. Some people are meditating, and I've met people who are meditating, and people who are going to ayahuasca ceremonies and doing all these kind of things over and over and over again in the hope that they're going to feel okay. But unless you actually slow down and tap into the real issue, the real source of your pain, you're never going to recover. So meditation is a beautiful way to sustain yourself in good shape over the long term. But first of all, you need to face into some of the difficult things. You've got to kind of clear it out. I've used the analogy before of a bottle like this. When we come into our life, it's empty, and as we move through life, the stress is the water level rising, and some of us will check out when our water level is only here, but others will have traumas earlier on in our childhood, and then difficulties later on in our life, bereavements, company failures, all these kind of things, and the water level rises to the top. When the water level rises to the top, things just start going wrong all over the place in your life. That's the telltale sign that you need to start to take action. So what you want to try and do is take the lid off and take some of the water out, so that you can bring the level back down to a sustainable level. And when it's there, that's when your meditation works really well. But in Jan's case, the water was overflowing, so meditating wasn't really going to help things. We needed to slow down first. We need to slow down sometimes in order to speed up. But to go to the point of when is the right time, I think it's really down to what's going on in your life at that moment. When I had a darker experience 2 weeks ago, it was anxiety that I hadn't experienced for quite a few years. So that was a new experience that I hadn't been around for quite some time. So I knew this needed to be explored a little bit more. Today, I was just in a bit of a funk, because I've been in my office for too long. I've been working on something for like 3 hours. My attention span was diminishing. And then the voice comes in and starts to question, oh, it's not really very good anyway, and nobody's really going to be that interested. And so I know I just need to go and change my state. So if it's just a mood enhancer where you just need to step out of where you are then it's just something that you can take action on immediately. But sometimes it can be a really dark moment, and that can be a moment where, for me, I've trained as a therapist, I practice Buddhist psychology, I work with people all the time. So it was okay for me to go deep and dark on my own and literally lie on the floor of my office for 3 hours and explore what's going on. For other people, it can be a good opportunity to book a call with your own therapist or coach and just walk it through. So I'm not saying that my actions are the right ones, but the reason why I wanted to share that was I wanted people to see that, it's not always rosy in my garden either, which we've spoken about before, Jan.
Yeah, thanks. That makes it clearer. Yeah.
Just gonna speak to a message that I've had here, which says, Justin, do you ever feel your life is too rigid and want to let go? What is your letting go? Please don't say meditate and exercise. Meditation and exercise most definitely are not my letting go. But I would say for me, every day that starts off, when I wake up in the morning, I always feel different in the morning. So 7 days in a week, I'll wake up. Some days I feel ready to go. Some days I'll feel a bit meh. Or some days I'm super excited. So meditation is the start of my day, is the letting go of everything else that I've brought into that moment. So we've come through dream state. We feel crappy. We feel happy. We feel horny. We feel angry. Whatever emotion you just taken out of your dream, I want to just create a ground zero so I have a level playing field. So within my meditation practice, it is letting go. So within meditation, it is always about just letting go. But then throughout my day, my letting go is just my time with my son, my time with my wife, chatting to friends, having a coffee, just shooting the breeze, not actually having to have any kind of big conversations. I often have, most days I'll have a client call, and that will be usually pretty heavy. It's just shoot the breeze. The importance of social interaction is massive, and certainly within this world of COVID, seeking out friends and having a coffee and talking about the most stupidest things you can possibly find is such a great release valve to let go. So I enjoy just chatting to people in the morning times on the beach after we've been in for a swim. There's always somebody just having a bit of a chat. We have a podcast club on the beach every Sunday where there's about 30 people and somebody nominates a podcast. We all listen to it, and then we sit around and everybody kind of gives their point on how they felt about it. So the kind of non-important, non-complicated, simple interactions with other human beings for me is just beautiful therapy. And then just chilling out with my wife and my son. I hope that helps. But meditation does help with letting go. Anybody else want to come in? Oh, SJ, you're there. Yeah.
Hi, Justin. Thanks. That was great. Your level of discipline is definitely inspiring. I was wondering, whenever you were starting out your journey, how did you deal with like family and friends thinking it was extreme? Because often when we make positive changes, people don't really take good to it.
I think in the context of my family, I think brothers and sisters probably still think I'm completely mad. But we've come from a household where mental illness was so prevalent. Like my father was so ill all the way through our lives, and for me growing up as a teenager, my father was suicidal. He was institutionalized. So I'd seen that, and when I started to go near that, I thought, my God, I don't want to go anywhere near that. So for me, the rigor and structure to get me away from feeling unwell was important. I think with my wife, it's probably a good example. When I stopped smoking, Beatrice was smoking. She was like, "Oh, stop smoking now." Oh. And then, of course, she stopped smoking. When when I stopped drinking, we were in a really nice hotel in Portugal, which had a beautiful Michelin star restaurant. And I just made the decision, okay, I'm going to stop drinking, lying on a sun lounger one day. That's it. I need to stop drinking alcohol. So we went for dinner that night, and the waiter came over with the menus, and I said to Beatrice, I'm not drinking anymore. She was like, what? You could have chosen a better time than like when we're on our 2 weeks holiday to stop drinking. I said, yeah, I know, but I just know I have to stop now. So, she wasn't too happy, but within, I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks, she said, oh, I'll stop drinking too. In fairness, she never really drank that much. And then when I decided to go vegan, she then was like, oh, well, that's just ridiculous. Like, how are we going to cope with you being vegan? And now with Luca, who was whatever, 9 at the time. But now she's a vegan qualified chef, and plant-based nutritionist. So, you when you make positive changes in your life and you start to look and act and feel better, it is very difficult for people not to take notice. So you will create this ripple effect where they will be interested and want to know how to change, or what are you doing. But then equally, people are not going to like the fact that you've changed. But they're not the kind of people that are really very good for you anyway. It's kind of toxic people, toxic relationships. So you kind of just let go of them. I don't know if that really answers the question, SJ, but it's hard. Okay, so it's not going to be easy,
Yeah,
but
no,
you
that
need to
did
make the
answer.
decisions for yourself.
Yeah.
Can I come in on that? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Laura, got you.
I've given up drinking and a lot of other things, and it triggers a lot of people, and you just have to realize that there's no, you stopped. Sometimes we all done it, when we suddenly start eating better or something, we want the whole world to eat better, we want to start convincing everybody, and you realize as you're going through it every day and it's becoming your everyday that it's not about convincing anybody. And you realize when you stop trying to convince people why you stopped drinking, or why you're eating better, or why you're getting up and swimming in cold water, or whatever you're doing, it's actually nothing about you at all. It's the fact that it's triggering them, and you sort of tend to leave them with it, and you stop trying to convince people about why you're doing something, and you just get much more comfortable in just being you. So it changes over time, I think. Is that fair enough?
Totally agree. And it goes back to what we said last week about authenticity. It's when you just tap into being yourself, like when you actually just accept that I feel happier, I feel healthier, I don't feel anxious, I feel fitter, I'm not medicating anymore. Then you start to think, well, I don't really care what anybody else thinks. What's important is, how good do I feel? And as a consequence, how good am I in my relationship? How good am I as a parent? Where am I providing the lead?
And they'll always try and pull you back to the person that they believe you to be, but you just start changing from inside out, and it's just different. And you sort of stop hearing the people trying to change you back, because you're just onto something else. That's all I can say. And you're not better than them or anything else. It's just different.
So a big part of doing the work on yourself, I always like that expression that, nobody's coming to save you. We all believe that sometimes somebody's going to help me, right? Nobody's coming to save you. You have to make those big decisions yourself, those harsh decisions to make the change. You've got to do it yourself. And then you've got to be your own leader and actually show yourself how you want to behave and how you want to live. But then as you build that sense of personal leadership and realizing that nobody else is going to come and save you, you are helping your family and friends see that there is a different way to live. Now, some people will follow it and some people won't. But the most impressionable are kids, and whatever we show them, they'll copy. If we try and be the best version of ourselves for ourselves, and we try and be disciplined enough to keep our own lives in good shape and our own mental health in good shape, it's only reasonable to then believe that the ripple effect is that will then have a positive impact on other people. So it's showing up for yourself. Like, that is my mantra, which you've all probably heard before, is, wake up show up for yourself and do the work. That's what you have to do. It's like life is not going to be just handed to you on a plate by sitting around and eating and watching Netflix. Be nice, but it doesn't work out like that. Again,
You made it sound easy.
well, I always say to my son whenever he has a school project on, and he always gets annoyed every time I say to him this, but I always go, how do you eat an elephant? You eat it one bite at a time. If you want to make massive change in your life, you have to get a plan together. And then you have to start a list of the things that you're going to change. So tackle like a biggie. Like for me, I was massively addicted to smoking. And I'd stopped smoking. It was only when Joshua died that in the kind of week before we knew he was going to die, and we'd taken him out of hospital and he'd come off all of the machines and everything else, I turned to smoking again, which I hadn't done for years. And then after his death, I was like smoking like a bloody chimney. So that was a terrible habit that I knew I needed to tackle, but I decided go after like the biggest, most difficult one, and then everything else is possible thereafter. But have that list so that you can start working through it.
Justin.
Hi, Leslie.
Hi. I mean, I'm a little bit like you. I've got a lot of, I've nurtured self-discipline throughout my life, really. I haven't conquered the wine one yet, but I drink a little bit of wine every day. But just one glass, but hey. But other than that, I don't jump in the sea.
I'm not advocating teetotal, don't worry.
No. But that's my next to conquer there. That's absolutely on my list. But I've been doing all that stuff. I've been, for years, but particularly since the COVID thing, because I'm sort of self-isolating. Because I smoked, I have low-level COPD, which means I'm very nervous about being near people, though I'm not actually shielded. But anyway, I've been doing the exercise like crazy and the meditating. I'm spiritually very calm and all that sort of thing. And I got really caught out last week, despite all the eating well and all that malarkey. And I got really caught out last week because I realised that I had a problem and that I was getting really quite low. Not so much, I had my first ever anxiety attack. And sorry to bring this up just at 8 o'clock.
No, it's okay. Go ahead. Don't worry.
And a proper, and I'm quite a sort of tightly coiled person, but I never had an anxiety attack or anything like that. And over very, very quickly, over a few days, but it's probably been building up since I've been pretty much, self-isolating, which doesn't help. I realised I was getting depressed because all the things you described just now about, go onto that podcast and everything like that, I realised that, and it only lasted for about 5 days, and I'm coming out of it because I've still applied lots of those disciplines, but I felt that I just didn't want to do anything. I've never been there before. I didn't feel like eating. I sort of did my exercise. I wasn't getting any joy in anything, and just didn't have any of that. It just went. And I realised that the thing I hadn't been addressing is I've always been glass half empty, and all the time I have this voice telling me, you're going to get lung cancer, or you're going to catch the virus, and it's all about medical stuff. And I realised that this negative voice up there all the time that's telling me everything's going to be awful hadn't been addressed. I'd missed that bit. I'd missed that side of me that's always been there, but got a lot worse and concentrated over this time. So, I mean, I did have that oomph to go and ring the doctor. And very, very luckily, I would say, unfortunately, I had a great doctor who spoke to me for 45 minutes, and I was straight away put on I think it's a CBT course that starts on Wednesday.
Brilliant.
And just actually saying it to somebody, I've got a problem here, I felt so much better. But yeah, that took me by surprise though, because I was applying all those disciplines, nearly all of them. I don't jump in the sea, and I have a glass of wine occasionally. But that really caught me by surprise. I could so easily have not run the doctor.
Yeah, and I think credit to you for doing that, because as I've said before, you know, a problem shared is a problem halved. You know, once we speak about it, we're kind of already letting it out. It's the whole idea of we suppress all these things inside us, and when we keep suppressing them and not dealing with them, an anxiety attack is just the consequence of the body literally shaking like a pressure cooker wanting to explode. And as hard and all as an anxiety attack is, it's never going to kill you. And when you actually know what it looks and feels like, you can go, oh, okay, well, if this is here, there is an issue that I need to address. There's something that I need to do a bit of work on here. And, you know, reaching out and speaking to your GP and explaining how you feel means that you then have somebody who has taken some of that burden away from you, and now you're able to take action. So much of coaching and therapy is just around being the place for somebody to come and speak and to let it out. But I think, to go back to the point that you made about the self-isolating side of things, it's one of the challenges that I don't think Zoom really makes up for. You know, we need human interaction, and I've learned that myself. You know, I realized that probably 2 months ago, that I needed to have more, you know, human interaction and more kind of chats and walks with people. You know, it may not be in restaurants or bars or anything else, but just find that space to walk and have a coffee with somebody, just so that we can free up that conversation, because we internalize so much. And if you're glass half empty, you often will say to somebody, oh yeah, but you know, this COVID thing, I think we're all doomed. It's never going to go away. And to have somebody else say, well, you know, no, I think you're wrong. You know, there's 9 vaccines being prepared. I think we're adapting as a society. I think we'll get through this. But those simple little conversations are hugely beneficial for our mental health, but they're not there often due to self-isolation.
Yeah, that's true, Justin. Thank you.
Thanks. Well done, Leslie. Your mental health will require you to take assertive action and to make difficult decisions in order to change the way that you feel about yourself. In the same way, if you want to change how you look physically, if you want to change how you feel mentally, you must put some discipline around it. And start off with a list, write it down, put a plan together, and then tackle some of the big numbers at the very top, and then work from that point on. But don't try and make it too complicated, and be kind to yourself. You know, take it slowly, tackle them one at a time. And it's going to get hard, and there's going to be times that you'll challenge yourself and that you won't be able to get on top of what you're trying to do. But just stay in the game. You know, keep going, be relentless, pursue your goals, and then you'll start to feel the change. So thanks a mil, everybody, for being on. It's lovely to have these conversations as usual, and I appreciate you guys taking the time as well.
Thanks
a million.
Thanks, guys.
everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.